Yiscah Smith is an educator, author, and spiritual mentor. She's also an astounding speaker who just released a new book on cultivating one's spiritual life via the weekly readings in the Hebrew Bible. And I'm Maayan Hoffman, executive editor at ILTV, and I welcome you back to the ILTV News Podcast. And welcome to you.
Thank you, Maayan. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's such a privilege for me to be here.
Thank you. Now, I want to jump right into this newest book. You've written a few books, but this one, Planting the Seeds of the Divine. What inspired such a project? And give me a little bit of a description of its core messages and why someone who's encountering you for the first time would be interested in reading it.
Fantastic question. I was hoping you would ask me something like that, and I anticipated that. The reason what brought me to write this book was for many, many years, as far back as the 1970s when I first came into Torah-based Judaism after my first visit to Israel. I fell in love with Israel. I started to fall in love with text. I was not so much falling in love with strict observance. However, I found myself being pulled by the charisma or by the enthusiasm and the devotion to being religious. And while I was pursuing a master's degree in Jewish education at Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan, I also entered into the world of Chabad, into the world of Chassidut, and very, very strict observance. And what I began to realize after several years was that the emphasis was on doing it right. And without hesitation, that was the oomph. However, my soul was not so much looking to do it right. It was to be more aware, to have an inner experience of God's presence within me and around me. And between my creative mind, my thinking, and my trying to be open-hearted, I did not feel that was being nurtured and encouraged. To no one's fault. It was just a different emphasis. So many years later, I left that world.
Left the Chabad world.
The Chabad world. And for a while, even the Torah observant world, completely. Yes, I needed to take a step back.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
And I knew it was only temporary. Coming back, though, I wanted to come back to a way of being Jewish that emphasized my spirituality, the inner part of me. So this book sees each parsha as an attempt, as an approach, as actually an invitation to cultivate a way of sensing God's presence within us.
Each parsha meaning each Torah portion.
Yeah, each Torah portion. And because there are 54 portions, I chose to go the 47 because some of them are doubled.
Okay.
The reason I went for the 47, the publisher allowed me only so many words in total, so I could say more and less rather than less and more. So I chose with the doubled ones, double weekly Torah readings, to address them as a whole. And I extracted from each one a midah.
What is midah?
So here the word midah has many different meanings depending.
Because usually I think of it as behaviors. I tell my children have good midot.
Exactly. Not that these are not good midot. However, the emphasis is not on self-refinement or better behavior. These are 47 ways of sensing, of sensitizing our spiritual awareness. Exactly what I wanted 50 years ago.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So now, why did you feel that this was the right time to release the book? I mean, was there a certain spiritual moment for you or a global moment that happened that pushed you to finally take these thoughts that you've been having and put them into words?
Yes. Actually, another great question, because this did not happen by circumstance. Ein makrim ba'olam. We say in Hebrew, there are no just, like coincidences. For several years now, I've been cultivating I have a very beautiful, larger than usual garden in the Nachlaot section neighborhood in Yerushalayim. And for many, many years,
I didn't know there were gardens in that area of Yerushalayim.
You have to come visit me, and you're surprised as it was to mine when the realtor showed me. I said, does it include this? And I've really devoted a lot of work to cultivating, to planting seeds. And once a month, I have a group over, all kinds of people come. It's like an alternative prayer space.
Okay.
We chant. I share a teaching, the spiritual and the weekly Torah portion. We meditate together. We share. We have a kiddush potluck lunch, and it's a way of celebrating, honoring Shabbat in a not as typical way, which is me.
Wow.
And many people asked me, especially parents who are visiting students who I teach here in Yerushalayim, or just visitors and tourists, or people who live here, is there a book? Is there a book like this? Because you only do this once a month, and we feel if there was a book. I said, well, not yet. And that planted the seed in my mind. And then a few years later, 2022, it was right towards the end of COVID. I was one of the faculty members who accompanied the students at Pardes every January in between the fall and the spring semester. There's a week-long trip to Poland, led by Rabbi David Bernstein, who at that time was the dean, and his second love are these heritage tours. He's a walking encyclopedia. And when we went to the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, he brought us, after I suggested, to the burial sites of the PSS and the Rebbe's family. The PSS and the Rebbe, Rabbi Kalman Shapira, is one of my biggest sources of spiritual and meditative practice, anchored in Jewish tradition.
And he's buried in Poland?
Well, he's not. He's unfortunately he was murdered at Chorwinki death camp, so he was buried in a mass grave. But in Warsaw, his mother, his wife, and son are buried. And that's the closest you could get to show kavod, to show respect and homage to him. And while I was there, and it was very moving, all of a sudden I felt this urge, Yiscah, it's time to write the book. It's time to write the book. And because he so influenced me, the book in part is dedicated to him and his memory.
Amazing. Now, you are, can I ask, religious from the technical sense today, I guess, if you want to, religiously observant and spiritually observant, or where, can I ask that question? With the...
So I'll give a simple answer to that. None of the above.
Okay,
right?
So what does that mean? Because I think that's important for people, because I feel like so often there's like a box you have to fit into. I mean, I've had my own iterations, and I think that I'm with you, but I just feel like people need to hear this.
I tried that. And what I realized is there's a little piece of me in all the different movements, but the bigger part of me really can't be held in any of them. So I believe I'm what's called post-denominational, like post-impressionist. Right? I'm post-denominational. I honor them when they arose, when they were established, for reasons of survival and response and reaction against and a movement towards. They were created in Galut, in the diaspora. I'm living here for decades, and I like to see my Judaism more as a way of thriving rather than surviving. So I'm post-denominational. I honor the movements and I honor the people that lead the movements. I teach many of the students at Pardes that become rabbis in the different movements, but it's not me. So my messaging is bigger than that, which is cultivating spiritual sensitivity. One can be, like in Israel, one can be traditional, we call Masorti, and be more spiritually sensitive. One can be Chiloni, secular, and likewise. And also one can be Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, and be more spiritually sensitive. So it's global. I teach a global type of messaging.
Wow, I mean, it's really fascinating, and I really love these metaphors of seeds and cultivation. You speak about something, I wrote it down because I thought it was really nice, about cultivating a garden of the soul. I mean, it's a beautiful image to think about. And it's especially in this time of year, which was one of the reasons I really was like, wow, Pesach is so much about, Passover is so much about the spring and the renewal and, our real first of the year starting over. What does it look like practically when you take that spiritual garden that you describe in such beautiful words into your everyday life? How can we do that?
Well, you really ask wonderful questions. I was hoping you would ask something like that also. What it means is, first of all, there's no Shulchan Aruch for this. There's no doing it right.
Okay.
That's more external behavior, how one ever interprets the way to observe the mitzvot. There's a teaching in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, which was compiled in approximately 200 CE, where it says that Schar mitzvah, mitzvahi, that the reward of a commandment is the commandment. And for decades, that really confused me. What does that mean?
Right.
And then one of the teachers that I learned Chassidut from, the Chernobyl Rebbe, who passed in the 18th century, but he's very alive with me today in his teachings, he said the reward of the commandment of observing it is, in Aramaic, the word mitzvah means attachment and connection. So the reward of the mitzvah when you do it, quote, right, is inwardly the experience of attachment. So I encourage, I invite, I support my students, my family, my neighbors, myself, and I reach out for the same, that we each can carve our own niche by cultivating our own garden. No two gardens look alike. So no two ways of loving God, of being aware of the Creator, of feeling gratitude, feeling we're living in like an amazing time period. As Heschel says, to live a spiritual life is to live in radical amazement. I see each person experiencing radical amazement in a unique way.
Wow. Does your book help for people to be able to do that then?
Yes, because the book I created a template for each chapter or each portion. That probably took longer than writing the book.
Isn't it always like that?
Yeah. First, I had to identify what the midah is based on the parasha, based on which verses. And then what I do is I teach what we call the pshat, the traditional, more obvious commentaries, more of the medieval commentaries. Okay. And then that speak to, and I channel it into the midah. Then I go deeper and bring the spiritual meanings from both the Hasidic and the Neo-Hasidic understanding of how we can use that midah to go deeper inside and cultivate this awareness. Then I share my own Torah. And that's something that is such, for me, like I am in awe of being allowed the privilege that I can share my own Torah.
Right.
But it really isn't mine. It's really my Creator's through me. And then I end each chapter, which really answers your question, with a suggested practice.
Okay. How
a person can actually do this. And on the Shabbat, during the week, it could be a different time of the year depending on what the midah is.
Can you give me an example?
Yes. The example of forgiveness.
Okay.
The forgiveness is when Yosef, after Jacob passed away, so the brothers concocted this story, and they came to Yosef, who was, I don't know who's listening in terms of the background. So we know that Yosef was second, he was the viceroy to Paro. And as long as Jacob was alive, Jacob was alive, so the brothers really had a very good life because he supported them. They were afraid that after their father died, he would then take revenge for having had been sold into slavery years ago. So they concocted this story. They knew it wasn't true. And when they told him the story, he knew that they knew it wasn't true. It was really heartbreaking. And they said, our father wanted us to tell you after his death that you please continue to support us, and which everyone knew that was not true. So his response was he cried.
Okay.
And we think what I'm suggesting, based on the different commentaries, is that the brothers did not forgive themselves. And that's something we don't talk about. We talk about Yom Kippur, asking God for forgiveness, asking each other for forgiveness. We know it's a midah. It's wonderful not to hold on to hurt.
Right.
What about forgiving myself?
Wow, so heavy.
And that's the midah that I bring down. That's my Torah, and I talk about that. For many years, I didn't forgive myself, so I know what it's like, and I learned how to cultivate to becoming more of a self-forgiving person.
Wow.
And and then I bring that into the practice.
That's incredible. Especially now and with everything we've gone through in the state of Israel, all of us personally, all of us collectively. So we are releasing this on Passover, as I mentioned, and Passover, as much as it is renewal and spring, it is also a time of freedom, a time that we get out of from Egypt and we go and we eventually receive the Torah. And you've got a lot of focus, as you're talking now, about inner healing or inner transformation. And I'm wondering how you see the connection between what you're talking about and freedom. Especially you mentioned the personal forgiveness, but we've got these 59 hostages in Gaza, 24 of whom we think are alive. They are not free for yet a second year. How can you take some of what you're teaching on Passover, the challenges we're having with freedom, and bring this together for us?
I did something at this year's Seder with my children and grandchildren. After the kids asked, it was when we talked about the 4 sons.
Okay.
So each of the children read one of the sons. And then I mentioned, I believe there's a 5th son this year, the one that is not able to ask. Because there are 24 of them, we hope, alive, and altogether there are 35 more that need to be buried properly in the Holy Land. So yes, very much aware, very much as part of my life here. I rely, and I'm really, as we say in Hebrew, somechet, I really lean on and depend on a teaching from Rav Kook, who wrote in his introduction to his Perush, his commentary on the Haggadah, when he asks, what is the difference between a slave and a free person? He's writing this. It's the pre-establishment of the modern state of Israel, but it was in the 20th century. It was not 1,000 years ago, when most Jews, in one way or another, were more physically free than not. And he believed to be free today, it's more than just having freedom of movement, to decide where to live, where to work, how to work, who to marry, and how to decide to live your life. It's when you become, and he uses the word in Hebrew, ne'eman, to be faithful to your inner being, which is our soul. And he gives an example. You could be physically, let's say, in prison, but yet free in your mind.
Yeah.
You know, when a lot of the years ago, I was privileged to see many of after the Soviet Union fell, many of those refuseniks come to Israel. And they were asked, how did you do this? How did you survive? I mean,
Natan Sharansky. Yeah, he came to mind the minute you were saying that.
Yeah, he was interviewed more than just a few times. How did you do it? And he said, I'll tell you how I did it. They never really enslaved me. They never had me. They never imprisoned me. They imprisoned my body, but my soul, my headspace, my consciousness, I was already in Yerushalayim.
Wow!
And then I learned several years later this teaching from Rav Kook. That's what it means to be free. And you hear some of the stories of some of the hostages as they've been released, and all of them should today, before I even get back home to Yerushalayim, be released.
Amen.
To see, though, what they did to stay human, to keep with hope, to keep with prayer. So while they physically were in deplorable, we can't even imagine what kind of conditions, and when they say them and describe them, we still can't believe it was that, but their spirit was alive.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's what we need to support that now. We need to really pray for these people and for each other, that we sense who have physical freedom. We also need to be spiritually free and not to feel pressured, not to feel coerced, not to feel like pressed, to adopt other people's either values or ways of life or suggestions.
I feel like it's so much easier said than done in some ways, and on the other hand, it's so important what you're saying, but it's difficult. I mean, especially in the modern era. I think of my children. I have 5 kids ranging in age from 21 to 8, and the modern technology, as much as I use it and love it, it's even that you become a slave to, and you see with and the peer pressures and there's so many boxes to check today.
That's right.
And
that's
it's
right.
so out there.
That's why everyone must buy my book and really share it with their children, share it with their parents, share it with their neighbors, because I don't expect of me, nor do I believe my Creator expects of me, to 24/7 always be in this higher consciousness. Mm-hmm. However, there's a lot of space between always and never.
Right.
And that's real living. That's living in the gray, which is something else I didn't find as much in my prior years in the ultra-Orthodox world, where in this type of more of the spiritual renewal type of consciousness, there's a lot of gray. Right. So I recommend and I invite people, dedicate 20 minutes a day just to be with yourself. To be aware of your breathing, to find reasons to thank God that you woke up this morning, It doesn't mean all the problems around you will go away. They won't. You, though, will see them differently.
Yiscah, what does your name mean?
Yiscah is actually, according to the Midrashic interpretations, Sarai's name, who became Sarah. Okay. So at the end of the portion called Noah, at the very, very end, she's referred to as Yiscah. And then when she married Avraham, at the time of Avraham, her name changed to Sarai.
Wow, okay.
So Yiscah, which she was considered to be a prophetess, not that I'm claiming that at all. But
well, we'll read the book and we'll let you know. Okay.
Well, you asked what it means. It means to look into and be aware of a certain depth that the everyday person may not be aware.
Oh, it's like really fitting for your book. I was wondering, and not because I knew it was going to turn out so connected, but it's a beautiful name, and I was actually curious. It's really... Oh, that's really special. A lot of people, though, I think since October 7th are questioning their relationship with God. I mean, some people got closer, and as you mentioned, some of the hostages, I mean, Agam Berger is somebody who always comes to mind. I mean, the beautiful things she said and she's written, how she's so deeply connected to her faith. And then there are others, not necessarily hostages, people who, whether they experienced it, who have worked in various fields that have been involved, first responders, doctors, journalists. I mean, all of us, that have touched in some way, that have distanced. And I guess, some feel maybe abandoned by God. Some, again, feel closer to God after you see something like that. How does your book support people across that spectrum? And do you have any advice for those people who are struggling today from this experience?
Do we have an hour or 2 hours?
About 9 minutes.
No.
and I have more questions.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Okay, so as we say, a regular chag on one foot.
No, but really, take some time. This is important.
The PSS and the Rebbe, who I quoted before, teaches in one of his books, B'nai Machshava Tova, which is cultivating a conscious community. So everything I'm suggesting for the individual, he speaks to how to have a community of this sort, which is what I've been doing in my garden each month, cultivating not only a beautiful garden, but also a community. He teaches that we must honor all of our emotions, not just the ones that bring us joy, because we could appreciate our joy and feel it more if we also honor other emotions of suffering, of confusion, of negative amazement. So my first invitation, and I bring it up in the book, and it's in my daily practice, is to be honest with my feelings. So there have been times, this is not my first war.
Right, of course.
I've been here, Yom Kippur War, 91 War, with each generation too. There was myself, then our children, and then one of my granddaughters is an officer in the army. So now it's like 1973, but several generations later. And Piguim and Intifadas. Sometimes I go, especially when the weather permitting, I go out into my garden where I sense God's presence as of the Creator, and I cry. I cry. I don't hold it back.
It's very impressive to cry. I have to say, whenever I start to tear, I say, stop, and then I say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry, Yeah.
Well, I do mean to cry because that's what's in my present moment. But then what comes after that, as the PSS teaches us, is pain and suffering and frustration and bewilderment can bring you to places of closeness to the Creator that joy cannot, and vice versa. So when I'm really feeling this worry, this pain, this sadness, this grief, I will say some verses of Psalms, and then I'll make up my own prayer, which he talks about in another entry in this book. He gives us permission to go out of the Siddur, and he was a very ultra-Orthodox rabbi. He prayed from the Siddur, and he invites us, God, come on, really, work with us here. Please, we need another miracle. Or God, help me understand what is being asked of me now. That's a big question I ask when I'm feeling that. Yeah. And I invite all the listeners to the ILTV News program. What is being asked of you in this moment? One of my teachers taught during COVID, when there's such severity around us, we can't change that, but what we can do is we can be sweeter. We can be more compassionate. We can put that energy into the bitterness.
Yeah.
Reb Daniel Katz, who lives in Yerushalayim, an amazing teacher, and he said we have free will over that. So I invite us. We all can do that. Maybe just smile a little bit more, not because you're happy, but because the person you're smiling to needs to be smiled to. It's not about me. It's about me being in service.
But that also helps you so much. I'll tell you a little story that I run every day. I'm a runner. And
I'm a swimmer. I do
amazing.
laps. Yeah.
Okay, great. So every day I run on this, I mostly go on the same, beginning of my path is the same, and I pass people. And I started a few years ago this thing where I actually say Boker Tov to everyone I pass and smile. And I did it mostly because I was like the same people every day. And I'm like, why don't we know each other? Even though running, we're not talking to each other. But
Right.
I feel like, there's such unique people in Yerushalayim. I also live in Jerusalem, but I'm up in Arnona. And I started this. And you know what happens is over the few years, I am friends with them, and it's changed my world.
That's right.
I don't know what its impacts for sure had on them, but it's for sure had an impact on me, because now I feel like it makes me happy to smile. And I think there's something really to that, what you said, because it brings joy to others, and as a result, it also brings joy to you to just put a smile on your face.
Yes. Anytime we're in service to something bigger than ourselves, we also benefit.
For sure.
It's not about either me or you. It's about
us,
me or we.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important what you just said. Now, you once wrote some. I mean, I was flipping through. I haven't gotten the full copy of the book, with full disclosure to our audience, but I did get some excerpts, and I was able to read the beginnings, and there were so many beautiful, I guess, sentences or phrases within it. And another thing that you wrote was, our essence as a creation by God is God, which is what you referred to before, right? It's a really powerful theological statements as much as it's a beautiful statement. And I'm wondering if you can also just, as we get ready to wrap up, I have one more question maybe afterwards, just to think about that divine inside you. I mean, how do you find that? And sometimes people feel so bad about themselves.
They do, yes. They do. And I know what that's like. For many years, I felt bad about myself. And I can only share my experience, but I have a strong feeling or idea that many people would share this with me. When I'm not connecting to the deeper part of me, the part of me that's not trying to survive, but the part of me that's creative, that's good, because I was created in goodness. I was created by our Creator. So there's a part of me that has got to be, that's part of my theology, that has got to be pure and alive and creative. How do I connect to that? I think that's really the question. Mm-hmm. If I can connect to that piece, and that's what this book is about. And it starts out as a seed of an idea, of a midah, and then it's planted through the practice. I will tell you, as I cultivate my garden, as recently as of this morning at 6:30, because before I go swimming, I always go out and say good morning to everything, and I weed and I patchki around, to use that word, that this requires a work.
Yeah.
But we were created to work. We don't like to work when there's no meaning or there's no purpose. But what better work, avodah, when we're transforming ourselves from feeling lonely and disconnected to rolling up our sleeves and investing our lives into feeling more connected.
Yeah.
What could be more than that?
So for people of all faiths, Jewish, Christian, spiritual seekers, what is the one seed from your book that you think every listener should plant this season?
Right, so, in the beginning, in my table of contents, the very first, which is Bereshit, when God and the Creator created everything, the midah that I take out from that is the need to connect with others. It's based, I was very inspired by Rabbi Dr. Abraham Chorsky, may his memory be for a blessing, who wrote, and this was years ago, this was decades, I read this I think in the 1980s, when at that time living in the Jewish Quarter in the Rova. He came out with a book, Let Us Make Man, and it's cultivating self-esteem through Torah values. And he said then that he felt the biggest, most painful spiritual malady was loneliness.
Yeah.
And, times how much today.
Right, with our phones and our no people anymore. And
when I write the need to connect with others, it starts with the other part of me.
Oh, wow.
The deeper part of me. That's the Baal Tanya writes, the first Rebbe of Chabad, in his book, Tanya, in chapter 32, which is Lamed Bet, which is the heart of the Tanya, that the commandment, you shall love your fellow as yourself, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's not really a commandment to love other people. It's a prescription, it's a description, not a prescription. what the verse is teaching us is you will love others the way you love you. So now you need to find what you can love about you that can connect. So not everybody writes a book. So how do I connect with people that are not authors? Not everybody is a Safta Yiscah like I'm blessed to be. So how do I connect with other people that are not? So we have all these achievements and we have these goals that hopefully we do achieve and dreams. But deep, deep inside, our mahut, our atzmut is the same. I share that with you, not more or less than I share with everybody else.
Amazing.
And that's, therefore, there's this need to connect with that piece of me so then I can connect with that piece of you.
Wow. Well, Yiscah Smith, thank you so much for talking about your book today and for being here today.
You're very welcome. May I add one more quick?
Sure.
The book will be launched for those who do live in the States, especially in the Manhattan area, on June 15th at the 92nd Street Y. People can look it up there online. And here in Israel on July 7th, Monday evening at Pardes in Yerushalayim.
And it's pre-order already now on Amazon,
It's
correct?
already available for pre-order, yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you, and Chag Sameach, Mo'odin L'Simcha.